When night fell over San Francisco in the 1950s, the city shimmered with the illusions of freedom. Neon lights flickered across foggy streets, jazz echoed from hidden bars, and soldiers returning from war drank away their memories in the Tenderloin district. But among the laughter, whiskey, and smoke, another kind of experiment was quietly unfolding. One that would blur the line between science and sin, between surveillance and seduction. This was no ordinary government project. This was Operation Midnight Climax, a covert sub-program of MKUltra, where the CIA turned bedrooms into laboratories and pleasure into paranoia. In 1954, a man named George Hunter White, a former narcotics officer with a taste for alcohol and danger, was hired by the CIA. His mission was simple yet unspeakable: set up secret safe houses in San Francisco and New York, disguise them as brothels, and secretly dose unsuspecting men with LSD while recording their every move. The CIA wanted to know how LSD could be used for mind control, truth extraction, and psychological warfare. But to test those boundaries, they needed subjects who would never question what happened to them. And so, under the neon glow of the city, Operation Midnight Climax began. Inside a small apartment on Telegraph Hill in San Francisco, the walls were painted bright red. Behind a framed mirror, there was a hidden camera. The women who worked there, hired prostitutes, were given specific instructions. Bring the men in, serve them drinks laced with LSD, and then just watch. In another room, George White sat behind the mirror, drink in hand, notebook open, observing the chaos that unfolded. The man laughed, shouted, sometimes panicked, sometimes confessed secrets they had never told anyone. White wrote down every detail, sending coded reports back to the CIA's technical services staff, the same department that handled espionage gadgets and poisons. To the men, it was just another wild night in San Francisco. To the CIA, it was science in action. But the science was deeply unscientific. There were no control groups, no consent forms, no medical oversight. The entire operation was built on deception. At first, the experiments were about LSD's potential for interrogation, but soon they evolved into something darker. White began experimenting with combinations of drugs, alcohol, hypnosis, and even suggestion. CIA scientists watched how ordinary people's behavior changed when their perception of reality was chemically shattered. Some subjects became euphoric. Others broke down crying. Some screamed in terror, believing they were dying. One report described a man who sat staring at his reflection for hours, whispering, "I'm not real." Meanwhile, in Washington, the CIA's upper ranks, men like Sidney Gottlieb, the so-called black sorcerer of MKUltra, pushed for results. Gottlieb was obsessed with the idea of the perfect truth serum. He wanted a chemical that could open the human mind like a safe, revealing its deepest secrets. He didn't care how many lives were destroyed along the way. By 1955, the operation had expanded. Safe houses were running not only in San Francisco, but also in New York's Greenwich Village. Each one was wired with microphones and recording devices. Agents collected footage of drugged men with prostitutes, sometimes using it for blackmail, sometimes for psychological analysis. CIA records show that hundreds of people were unknowingly drugged. Their names were never recorded, their stories were never told. George White himself wrote in his diary, quote, "Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" End quote. He wasn't exaggerating. Over time, even CIA officers began to question the morality of what was happening. Some scientists within the agency warned that the experiments had gone too far. But every objection was silenced under the same justification: national security. If the Soviets were experimenting with mind control, the CIA believed America had to do it first and do it better. By the early 1960s, Operation Midnight Climax had begun to unravel. Neighbors complained about strange noises and odd visitors. The local police grew suspicious. The LSD-fueled experiments were becoming too wild to hide. In 1966, as the counterculture began to embrace LSD as a symbol of freedom, the CIA quietly shut down its safe houses. All files were ordered destroyed. Only fragments survived: letters, invoices, and White's own diaries. Those surviving documents paint a disturbing picture. The CIA had not only manipulated minds, they had shaped the very cultural revolution that would soon sweep across America. Some of the earliest LSD that made its way into the hippie scene, it came from the CIA's own supply. Decades later, when the MKUltra files were declassified in the 1970s, journalists uncovered the truth about Operation Midnight Climax. Senators were horrified. A government hearing described it as an obscene chapter in American intelligence history. But by then, George White was dead. Sidney Gottlieb had retired in silence. And the victims, ordinary men who had walked into those rooms without a clue, would never even know what had been done to them. In the end, Operation Midnight Climax was more than an experiment. It was a mirror. A reflection of how power, when hidden from the public eye, can twist morality into madness. The CIA claimed it was about protecting the nation, but in the process, it exposed how easily a free society can be manipulated from within. Because the real weapon isn't LSD. The real weapon is control, and the ability to decide who gets to remember and who is forced to forget. History isn't always written in books. Sometimes it's hidden in classified files, sealed behind walls, or buried under lies. This was the story of Operation Midnight Climax, one of the darkest corners of America's own